handing over to Martina, who is the chair of Climate Change Task Force W20 and has 12 plus years in sustainability. Over to you, Martina, for the session on women as change makers in climate resilience action.
Your Excellency, thank you. From there or there? Okay. Okay, let's go. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's a very pleasure for me being here and introduce this challenging panel. So I thank you so much, the W20 India Secretariat, for this great opportunity. Can you feel climate change? Is no more a scientific theory, but unfortunately is a reality. We can see it from our breath. We can see from the lots of flooding events, seismic events we are unfortunately facing in lots of countries all over the world. And bad news, climate change is not gender neutral. Women are very affected, the more affected by climate change, 14 more times than men. And climate change affects our life, health, safety, security. Just think that in the agricultural sectors, the 43% in the labor force are women. And in case of natural disasters, they are the one with highest probability of dying or being injured. Just let's think on those countries where for women women are not allowed to swim in case of flooding. What will happen? They will die before. Highest probability of dying, of being injured. So it's a matter of rights. Where there are no rights, we have a higher impact on women from the climate change point of views. And there is also an impact on dropping out from schools. In case of natural disasters like flooding, seismic events, girls are the one leaving schools for helping their mothers because they live usually in patriarchal societies. So today is a great pleasure for me to moderate this panel with distinguished guests. It's a pleasure to introduce Samantha. I will apologize in advance for your last name pronunciations. Samantha, Gender Equality Thematic Group at the Asian Development Bank. Thank you so much. Joo-Hyun Kang, Founder and Executive President, Global Competitiveness Empowerment Forum. Elena Myakotnikova, Advisor to CEO at SIBUR. Very welcome also to Prachi, Shevgaonkar, Young Climate Changemaker and Advisor, Climate Leadership Coalition, and Natasha Zarine, co-founder and managing director of EcoSattva Environmental Solution. Unfortunately, Natasha is sick, so she left me a message to share with all of you and continue the panel. Thank you. So let's start with Samantha from the IDB. Oh, sorry. I changed the location and I'm a little bit emotional. So we will start with Angela. Angela, Founder and Executive President of Global Competitiveness Empowerment Forum and Delegate of the W20 South Korea. Angela, welcome. And from your perspective at a global level, tell us about the main challenges related to climate change gender today and what is the role of a multilateral system like the G20, the Women 20 to go beyond and achieve women's equity and equality on this field. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. It's my great privilege to chair the Climate Change Task Force of G20, India's presidency of W20, with more than 20 delegates from 11 countries. And we are going to work together throughout this year to generate a policy recommendation for climate change. I think main challenge is that the climate change gives higher damage to women, but the severe loss of voices of women. As Martina mentioned, women comprise 43% of agricultural labor force in developing countries. And then the abnormal weather and then natural disaster makes the lives of mothers, daughters, and then wives more difficult. However, women are underrepresented in COP27, actually last year, the 27th conference on parties of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, namely UNFCCC. Only 7 out of 110 country leaders are women, and then only 34% of negotiating teams are women. But I strongly believe this, I would like to see this situation as half glass full rather than half glass empty. I think climate change can be a niche point and then breakthrough to leverage as a positive driver to transform the women not as victims, not as minority, but as changemakers and also the leaders of climate change. I think gender action and then climate action should intertwine together, and then solutions should go together through a close reinforcement. As you know, last year, CSW, the Commission on Status of Women, the theme was climate change. G20 as a strong multilateral group, I believe we should really advocate to include W20 in the environmental ministers meeting of G20 and also minister meeting of gender equality. And especially W20 chair or chief coordinator, their advocacy and entrance should be guaranteed in those minister meetings to advocate for solutions of the nexus between gender and climate change. Actually, the labor ministers meeting, G20, included the Women 20 to push advocacy for Brisbane's goal as Gordon emphasized in the morning. I think also G20 leaders can think and then collaborate with the UNFCCC, maybe to establish a high-level panel on gender and then climate change to strongly advocate to include gender lens in national determined contributions in every country. And maybe the framework that the Honorable Minister Irani emphasized and then suggested in the morning. And then also the G20 leaders can advocate gender-sensitive, the increase of gender-sensitive adaptation funding, but not to decreasing mitigation funding for capacity building of women eco-planners, and then women business associations, and then NGOs, and then grassroots women. Finally, I would like to tell you that last year I was really inspired to hear the talk of the female Prime Minister of Barbados. In her keynote speech in COP27, actually, her speech was really powerful and charismatic. And then she spearheaded Green Bank, the first Green Bank in Barbados, in Caribbean, to support NDCs in Caribbean regions. I think we will soon hear ADB's representative about women-led development work. But this year, Asia, and next year, Brazil, 2025, South Africa, and then this women-led development support can be made so that we can become a change maker in climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. And just to remind you that climate change and gender is one of the 5th priority of our W20 Indian presidency. And if you stay 30 minutes, you will have the chance also to ask questions to our distinguished panelists. So stay with us. Now is the real tour of Samantha, a gender equality thematic group of the Asian Development Bank, and please tell us the main challenges related to climate change and gender from an Asian perspective, let's say this, and what about climate resilient project and action in ADB? Thank you so much, Natasha.
Thank you very much, Martina, and thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here today. This is a huge topic, so I will try to do justice to it in just a few moments. I have just a couple of slides to help illustrate. We can bring them up. Right, okay, great, thank you. So I think we heard a lot earlier in Martina's introduction about some of the disproportionate gender impacts of climate change. I mean, I think climate change is the issue of global development at the moment, and the solutions lie with women being a key part of the solution. I mean, that's a real no-brainer. I think we know that women suffer more because they are highly represented in the sectors that are impacted. So we heard this morning from the Honourable Minister of women being very involved in agriculture, for example. That is true, but yet women, when we see changes in crop patterns due to changing climate patterns, women are the ones that are obviously bearing the brunt of it, and that has a close link also to food security at the household level. So I think seeing women as change agents in the agricultural sector, making sure that they get access to the right type of training. They may be present in the sector, but they don't always have equal voice or access to land and decision making. So that's really key. We heard about disasters and emergencies. I won't talk a lot about that, but I think we all know that we really need focused, gender responsive resiliency interventions to prevent that going forward. And I think it's also important that when you think of the changing health effects due to climate, temperature change, heat stress, different food availability, and the vector-borne diseases that come with that, women for biological reasons also often suffer disproportionately. So I talked about the key role and seeing women as central in food security from an agriculture, fisheries, aquaculture, forestry, all those lenses. I think one thing we haven't talked about very much is the impact of energy transition. I mean, as all countries in the region, including G20 countries, move to Paris alignment, that's going to have a huge impact on the energy transition, which can be positive or negative for women. And so it's very important to make sure that women are crucially involved in renewable energy efforts, both in terms of training and employment, but making sure that they are part of the voice. And lastly, as we heard from my colleague Angela, making sure that women have a voice at climate change policy, whether it be at national level, but also internationally. And that's in terms of representation, but also in terms of having a seat at the table at the negotiation. So just moving quickly to why ADB cares about this and what we do. So from our perspective, talking about the member countries of the Asian Development Bank, which cut across all of Asia and the Pacific region, actually, we see that the battle against climate change will be lost or won in our region. And it will be lost and won also depending on the extent to which we take a gender perspective. So for the Asian Development Bank, we like to call ourselves the Asian Pacific's Climate Bank. And that's because we were the first multilateral development bank to actually make very strong commitment to climate investment. We have a commitment to immobilize and invest over 100 billion by 2030 in climate. We also have, at the highest corporate level, twin commitments to climate and gender as two of our corporate priorities. So that means it's very core to all the work we do. So some of the ways we do that is at project level. We have very intentional designs around making sure that women are we have targets for women in all training. So an example there is a project in Tajikistan, which has specific targets for women's training in climate smart response at the decision-making table, and it's very much embedded in our projects. We're also just launching a new, quite exciting program called the Community Resilience Partnership Program, or CRPP, which is really focused on the nexus of climate change, poverty and gender at community level. So again, investing at scale in community resilience. We actually have a partners meeting starting in Bangkok tomorrow, which is bringing together the key donors as well as the 4 countries that will be participating: Indonesia, Cambodia, Bangladesh and Nepal. And it has, what's interesting about it is it actually has a dedicated window focused on women-focused investments at community level, working with grassroots women's organizations. And then the last thing, just to pick up on again what my colleague said, the importance to bring in technical assistance for that climate and gender policy nexus at all levels. So the way we've done that is, for example, we supported a technical assistance looking at 3 countries, Laos, Fiji, Mongolia, which looked at 2 levels. One, how can we demonstrate green jobs for women that work? And secondly, how can we work with the government to do an analysis of their national climate policy and making sure that that brings in a gender perspective? And we have some interesting publications around that. So I'll just stop there and I can maybe share more later at the second question. Thank you.
And now let's move to the private sector with Elena, advisor to the CEO at SIBUR. So firstly, according to your experience, what about the main challenges related to climate change and gender, and what is the role of private sector in fighting for social and environmental justice? Thanks.
Well, I think the most challenges are indicated as G20 India presidency aims. It's one Earth, one family, or one future. You know, there is kids like 2-3 years old are playing the game. They are learning how to play. They put a blanket on them and they play a game hide and seek. And they think they are invisible. And sometimes adults behave the same. So women as a climate change makers, we are not playing this game. We really do make changes, sometimes in small steps. For example, last year in Indonesia, I think the really great tradition was established. Small steps we did, we released fishes to the Toba Lake. We also planted some trees in Caldera region, Toba Lake, North Sumatra.
And I think this is very important to do small steps to establish such a traditions. And I think it is important to talk on the G20, W20 level. At the same time, thank you for this bridge. What we did from our side, we also decided to plant trees. So we as a SIBUR company planted more than 1 million trees last year. And we are planning to aim 5 million trees before the end of next year. We are doing a lot about climate. For example, in one of our regions, our plant polyeth, we give second life to 1.7 billion plastic bottles every year. We recycle them and give them a second life. Also, at this plant, we use 10,000 solar panels. Imagine how big is it? It's 11 hectares. It's 8 football fields. And also within my favorite project, Green Formula, which is established, thank you very much, we found a unique tree with very high potential, it's very temperature resistance, low temperature and high temperature, and very unique CO2 absorption. Standard absorption is 1.5 till 6 tons per hectare, and our absorbs more than 30 tons from hectare. It's amazing, and it's not like aggressive tree like Pavlovnia, it's normal standard tree. And what also we did, we created the methodology, and we put it the methodology as open source for all nature-based solutions. So it's open for everybody, everyone can use the methodology. We didn't keep it for ourselves. And another example, what we did last year, and it's certified this year with one of the largest world auditor. We reduced for 3 million tons, it's 3 million carbon units. We reduced 3 million tons carbon emissions, and we certified it with world auditor. So do with us, do as we do better when we did. Thank you.
Thank you so much for showing us the perspective of the private sector on climate change, solution and action. Now is the turn of Prachi, that is climate entrepreneurs also. So I'm really curious to know more on your perspective of young change maker in climate change, in fighting against climate change in India, and on the role of role modeling in inspiring young generations. Thanks.
Hello. Yeah. Yes. When Dharitri ma'am here and Prashant sir at the back called me here today, I knew it was going to be a day I'm going to truly cherish, because I think I'm one of the youngest people here. Is there anybody in the audience below 25? Okay, so I'm one of the few young people here then. But it is not often that I get to be in a room filled with remarkable women like all of you. And so to answer your question, I would like to tell all of you a little bit about my journey in building a youth-led app for climate action. Some challenges we faced along the way, and some young people I met who became role models for our movement. I remember when I was a young student in college, I first learned about the climate crisis and the role I was playing in it. And it bothered me. But I remember going to my father and asking him, what can an ordinary girl like me do about a big problem like climate change? So we decided to start small. We took up a simple quest to reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions by 10% every year. So I started researching on which actions of mine are leading to most emissions. How can I reduce them? How can I measure them? And a few months into doing this, you know what happened? I began to enjoy it. It almost became like a fun activity that I was doing with my family. And it felt good that at least at my own level, I was doing something. And then another interesting thing happened. My friends, neighbors, other young people around me began to take notice. They would come to me and say, it looks like you're doing something interesting, and we would like to be a part of this. And that's when I began thinking, how can I take this individual quest I've started and bring global citizens on it with me? And from this, we came up with the idea for Cool the Globe app. We decided to build an app to help people like you and I reduce our personal greenhouse gas emissions to a target. Now, to do anything at all, to overcome any challenge at all, what are some of the things we need? I thought that we first need a clear target, a goal in front of us, and then we need to be able to measure our progress on that target. So in the app, as soon as a citizen comes in, we gave them a monthly target to reduce their personal emissions based on their carbon footprint. And then we showed hundreds of simple day-to-day lifestyle changes we can all make to meet those targets and the emissions we avoided by doing that. So for example, give me a show of hands, how many of you went to the Ajanta Ellora festival last night in a bus? Okay, quite a few. So each one of us saved 1.8 kg greenhouse gas emissions by doing that, by going collectively in a bus. And if all of us today go back to our hotel rooms and increase the temperature of the AC just by 1 degree Celsius, we'll each be saving 800 grams of carbon emissions, and collectively we would have all saved 200 kg greenhouse gas emissions. So we showed hundreds of such simple things that we can all do across travel, home, appliances, materials, and the emissions that we can save by making these lifestyle changes. But then people started coming to me and asking, what difference can one person make? We believe that when people like us come together, then our collective actions can be extraordinary. And to show that, we kept a global meter on the homepage of the app, which will show the emissions avoided by all of us combined. Now, throughout my 3 years in college, I worked on building this app, and by the time I graduated, it was ready. And then I realized now is just the beginning. Then the main challenge came. We have this platform, but how do we get people on it? And that's when I turned to youth around me for help. Along with some of my friends, we started making campaigns on what the common man can do about climate change. I shared that campaign with my friends shared it with some more. And before I knew it, millions of people from around the world were watching them. Our message was very simple, that let each one of us start by reducing our own carbon footprint by 10% every year. People began recording their climate actions on the app, sharing it with each other. I remember a 9-year-old girl emailed me. She said that she asked me, what change can I make in my own life to fight climate change? And then she started going to her school on a cycle, and by doing this for a few months, she recorded on the app saving 60 kg greenhouse gas emissions, 3 times her weight. An 86-year-old woman called me. She said that her granddaughter was getting married, and she was going to buy a new sari for the occasion. But instead of doing that, she decided to wear her own sari from her wedding 40 years ago. And she recorded saving 15 kg greenhouse gas emissions on the app by doing this. One action inspired 10 others. Young people from around the world became our climate ambassadors. And through youth-led grassroots movements like this, today we have citizens from 110 countries coming on the app. And collectively, as I speak to you, all of these citizens have saved 2.5 million kg greenhouse gas emissions on the platform by making simple lifestyle changes in their own lives. But this is just the beginning. It is said that girls with dreams become women with vision. The biggest change that I've seen in myself over these years of building Cool the Globe is that my vision of what is possible has expanded. Because of the work I do, I get to interact with young girls from around the world. And the reason I believe that girls and women will play the most important role in the fight against climate change is because young girls today are ambitious. We have a yearning to make a difference, to leave our mark. When I was in school, I used to read in the history books about freedom fighters, changemakers, innovators, scientists, people who changed the world. And I used to think, I live in such boring times. I should have been born then. Today I realize that I find myself at the cusp of my youth in perhaps some of the most defining decades of human existence. We have only 30 years to avoid the worst effects of climate change. And for young people like me, for all of us, this is not just a responsibility. It's an opportunity to make an impact, to change the world. When I started my journey, I read somewhere that it's going to take a miracle to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Today, I have faith that when women like us come together to become role models of climate action, miracles can happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prachi, for your energy. And welcome to Natasha that realized to joining us. So a big clap for her. Now doing well. So Natasha, so let's talk about your role of female founder. So what about the role of female founders for climate change, adaptation, and mitigations?
Hello, yes. So thank you for that question. I think when we earlier discussed this, what I understood was women in India and their role in the climate change and mitigation space. And I think that no conversation about women and climate action can start without a look at the background. And women in India really have been at the forefront. Wherever there's been a chance, they have stepped forward and shown the way. Whether we start, and these are women from all walks of life, whether you look at tribal women who led and started the Chipko movement in Uttarakhand that started protection of forest species and activism and in that space, or whether you look at our only woman prime minister who not only enacted laws that were way ahead of their time for protection of the environment, for protection of national forests, wildlife species, even renewable energy. In fact, the first plastic bag ban was in 1986 in Delhi. So she had, the foresight to take on these issues right in the 70s and 80s. It was also put into our constitution as not only a duty for every citizen to ensure the protection of the environment, but also as a directive principle to state policy that whatever we do needs to have a focus on the environment and environmental protection. So I think this far encompasses India and women in India who've been looking at climate change and climate mitigation. And then, of course, I was also asked about entrepreneurs in the space. And while we can look at Sunita Narayanan, who has started CSE for the past, she's been heading CSE for the past 3 decades. And it's at the forefront of research on climate action and mitigation in India and across continents. You could also look at, in the more traditional sense of entrepreneurship, Anu Aga's Thematic, that's led renewable energy. Natasha Aipe's Good Earth, that provides commercial construction and infrastructure in a sustainable manner. So sustainable architecture. She's made it something that's not a boutique thing, but that can be bought in metros and rural areas in India. So really women have been playing a role, and they continue to, and as entrepreneurs, as founders. But I think this reminds me of a conversation that I'd had with Mr. Pramatraj Sinha, the founder of ISB and Ashoka. And he had said, entrepreneurs are great and we need them. But what I'm more excited about are solutionaries. This was a word he coined, and we kind of changed it to solutionists. And this is what we found that women founders and entrepreneurs are. They kind of venture into places, into areas that people have kind of given up on, or the current solutions haven't worked. And that's where the concept of the glass cliff comes, right? Everyone's heard of the glass ceiling. The glass cliff is you go and you take on a problem that is you're expected to fail, and then it's like, okay, but they're still making way and they're blazing trails in those areas. Whether it's waste management. I should give you the example of Almitra Patel. who she was an entrepreneur of her own right, but then when she moved to live on a farm on the outskirts of Bangalore, she found that the city was dumping its municipal waste just outside, like creating a dumping ground. And she was like, wait a minute, what is this? Where is the rule? What are you supposed to do? And she started to find out and found that there were no rules governing solid waste management or, the circularity in waste management that we talk about now. And so she went to the Supreme Court and she filed a petition. And this petition was not like, oh, do something about it. She's like, I'm here, I want to help solve this. And so the Supreme Court then formed a committee, and she traveled to 168 different cities looking at what the problem was, why it was the way it was, and what can be done to solve it. And that's how India got its municipal solid waste management rules of 2000, thanks to her efforts and this collaborative effort of the Supreme Court and the government. And after that, what happened was there were many other organizations that came up that decided to start working in the space of circularity. How do we solve this problem? And then you had, Hasiru Dala from Bangalore, you have Chintan in Delhi, all of these sprung, led by women, trailblazing in a space that nobody wanted to touch, or that was being done in a very conventional, inefficient manner. And really the waste management industry as we know it today has been built by these women entrepreneurs. I mean, Gauri and I have been very much influenced by all of them. We worked in Aurangabad, we came up with the boat ramp process, and now this process that we learned on the ground in, working in our wards here or working in Vaijapur, Ratnagiri, is a process that we've trained an organization in Buenos Aires and in Bali to deliver. So when the chance is there, women take it and they go into areas that most, I want to quote Jacqueline Novogratz and something she said. I kind of want to paraphrase her. So she said that women entrepreneurs, she said entrepreneurs, I'm going to kind of make it women entrepreneurs, are the seekers of solutions, and that they will go into these places where both market and traditional aid and traditional charity has failed. And this is what we have seen across the country. So is everything okay, good, hunky-dory then? Are we all sorted? We're all set to take on the climate crisis? I think there is clearly a lot more that we need to do. And what affects women in this space, whether you're in the climate space or in any other space, is I think well documented. Women facing hardships in the workplace and entrepreneurship, whether it's circumstantial, biological, or socio-cultural, I think is well documented. But I think a lot of it is also internalized, and if we're going to take on climate change and the 6th Mars extinction, we're going to really have to talk ourselves out of the stuff we've learned and kind of step forward and do what it takes and work really together. People of all genders are going to need to collaborate to drive change to tackle the climate crisis. So I'll stop here. I had been given 7 minutes. I had planned exactly what I was going to say, but I think this is a different kind of conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Natasha, for sharing with us also practical actions that will inspire all of our delegates and guests from all over the world. So thank you so much. So let's go back to Angela, because we are here for the G20. So what's your key recommendation to G20 leader on climate gender?
Yes, that would be the job that we have to do with our task force members and then all the delegates. Actually, in every complex situation, the good way is to go back to basic. So let me simplify the burden of G20 leaders by just doing A, B, C, D, E. I prepared for this session. So the A, apply gender lens in every NDC policies and projects. 4B for barrier-free capacity for capacity building projects to support women ecopreneurs And then, we need more Prachi, and then we need more Greta Thunberg, right? And then by delivering their climate finance pledges, to send the money, and then, the upgrade, scale up their money, and then also finally by enhancing gender-sensitive adaptation funding, but not decreasing mitigation funding. That's all my then our climate finance work can generate more the women leaders, change makers. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And just to remind that in June we will have our final communique with our key recommendation for the G20, and this is a good start. Samantha, what about your key recommendation to the G20 leaders?
Thank you. I think I have one more slide if it can be brought up, but I can already see some synergy with what Angela was saying. First of all, I think that the G20, this is a great opportunity because it's a critical space for policy discussions on this, both in terms of the impacts of gender and climate within G20 countries, but also in terms of global leadership. So if I could please pull up my slide. There was a slide there? Okay. So my three things, I think, and I just want to get that so I can get it in order. I think the first one is, serious investment in women's resilience at community level. With lots of good practices out there, but I think serious scaling up, big money into that. So that would be my first one. The second one is the green jobs agenda. The third slide, please. Oh, I'll do it. The second one is around green jobs, and that requires an investment in STEM education throughout the life cycle, because these are the jobs of the future, and it's going to affect all sectors. And if we want women to be able to participate as entrepreneurs and basically work in them, we need to skill them in the right way. And then the third one, that's where it relates to Angela, climate policy. So I would just add on linking gender and climate policy at national level, so making sure that NDCs are gender responsive and also financed for the climate action within them, but also making sure that women's voice is there at all levels. So that means governments increasing women's representation on their COP delegations and the like. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you so much. Elena, your key recommendation to the G20 leaders.
I'm as a mother. I have self-made kids and adopted different kids. And right now we're talking about their future. Not our future, but their future. And I hope my daughters will not participate in W20 in the future, because W20 will not exist at all. We won't need it. So I think that the best future is to don't have in the future W20, and to have a common platform to share best practices, best solutions. So it is a great idea Andrea is doing every year almost. She's bringing her kids, white meaning, and kids have to be part of G20 platform to hear their voices, and we need more involvement of our kids. And two more recommendations: small steps. Every time, every day, do small steps. And as we were talking about kids and miracles, Alice in Wonderland, we need to run 2 times faster.
Exactly, we need to run, and the agenda is running now. We have 7 years left for 2030. Thank you, Elena. Prachi, your key recommendation to leaders on gender and climate change.
Yes. So I had heard time and again that women are disproportionately affected by climate change. We heard it today from all of us. But before I give out my recommendations, I want to tell you all about a time I understood what it truly means. A few years ago, I visited a study center in a slum area near Pune, where I met a bright young girl. I asked her, "Which standard are you in?" She said, "I don't go to school these days." Why is that? It was because our city, Pune, was seeing a drought. The Khadakwasla dam had dried up, and her home had access to water only for 2 hours in the afternoon. Her brothers had to go to school, and nobody else in her family could afford to stay at home during that time. So this young girl had to skip school, stay at home to fill buckets with water. This is when I realized that climate change is not just about damage to the environment. It's about our lives. climate change impacts our education, our voice, and our very freedom. But if there's anything that this day has taught me is that women are not only victims of climate change, but we can become warriors in this fight. And to show that we are very serious about it, we can start by putting some money into it. And so my first recommendation is to set up a G20 fund for women-led climate innovations. My second recommendation and request to G20 leaders is to let young girls become G20 leaders. Can we set up an advisory committee of young climate leaders so that our voice is not just heard, but becomes a part of the decision making? Yesterday, as I was coming here today, my cab driver asked me an interesting question. He said that all day he had only been driving women to the venue. And he found that quite unusual. He was asking, why is that? So I told him this is an engagement group focused on gender. He said, Acha, म्हणून एवढ्या बायका आहेत. That's why so many women are here. So my last and most pressing recommendation. A couple of weeks back, I was also a part of a working group on climate action. Last year, I represented India at COP27. In both cases, I was the minority. And so my recommendation is to begin by changing that. Let us have more such rooms filled with women, not just here at W20, but in all engagement groups of G20. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prachi. Natasha, your key recommendation to the leaders.
Can you hear me? Yes. All right. So, key recommendations to the leaders. I think the first really is that we need to look for systemic solutions because the problems that we're facing are systemic. We've built them. We've kind of, at least for the anthropogenic causes of these problems. So we need to focus on systemic solutions rather than just on products or technology. Systemic solutions in the space of governance and accountability. This would be one thing. Then the next thing is our solutions need to keep people, especially the poor, at the center. And then I think the solutions we design will be effective as has been shown before. And finally is like we need to focus on grassroots organizations also. Grassroots organizations understand what the requirements in their area is, what the how the climate affects them, and they can be bridges between large government organizations as well as the ground realities. So I would say these three areas really need to be focused on. Maybe that fund can also be diverted and directed towards really regional, hyper-regional organizations. But I think another thing is for women, like a recommendation for all of us women, right? We really need to step forward now. It is scary, and we're facing a lot of barriers, but that's okay. We're faced with a huge crisis at hand, and it's going to need all of us, women, men, people of all genders, to really collaborate and work together. And so we need to step forward and kind of shed our inhibitions. I think one of the things that we struggle with, that I struggle with, and I see a lot of other women struggling with, is taking credit for the things we do. Like stepping forward, doing something unusual, taking credit for it, and we don't want to take credit, or we're told that it's not nice, it's arrogant to take credit, and we find that that's something that we're not doing, and it has an effect that's not good for anyone. So let's not be worried about the tags that people put on us. Let them call us opportunist, arrogant, aggressive, whatever. We really need to step forward and build these solutions and then own them. And we need to work together with men. It would have been wonderful to have, I think 20 years from now, it would be great to have equal number of gender representation, even in women specific events, and that would be us going in the direction of solving all our various challenges. And, this reminds me also of a cartoon I had once read. It was a drawing. So there was this man standing on stage and talking about how we need to have sustainable agriculture, this is what we need to stop pollution, blah blah blah. And then there's someone in the audience who says, oh yeah, well, what if this is all a hoax and we build a better world for nothing? I really hope that, whatever people may say or the science says, and it really does say that we need to get our act together, we will step forward and do what is needed now to impact climate mitigation and adaptation efforts on ground. We have to do it, and we have to do it wherever we are, and like I said, not be afraid of being called whatever. So yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Natasha. And thanks to our distinguished speakers. We will take inspiration for your recommendation and thoughts. Just let me add that I 100% agree with their sharings, but women could be and should be key actors for fighting against climate change, but there is no climate justice without peace. So we all should stand for peace in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, and all conflict zone now. So please, let's stand for climate justice, but also all together working for peace. That is very important. The organizer told me just one question. There is one lucky one. Indonesian friends, so agreed among you? So the third one win, always win. Please, ma'am.
I have one question for all of us. We are talking about recycling of plastic. Recycling of plastic where, now it is getting converted into fabric and various materials. Why can't we have a resolution no to plastic?
Thank you so much. Elena, first, wanna reply?
If plastic won't exist in this room, there won't be electricity, water, and anything. So we need plastic, like we need metal, like we need glass, we need all the modern materials. But we need to be smart. We need to reuse and recycle everything. Metal, glass, plastic, and everything.
I agree.
Additional production.
Exactly. And how the paradox is how we can guarantee right to health, drink, and at the same time not drinking water from bottle of plastic. So this is a big issue. We should improve infrastructure to guarantee right to health, right to access to water, and reduce the plastics. And when anyone else, anyone other?
Yes. Let me. You might heard the ethical consumerism, eco-mom, and then Millennium Z, young generation, they are really environmental friendly. So the consumer advocacy can press the private sector corporations. Well, among my hats, I'm founder and executive president of Global Competitiveness Empowerment Forum, or CSR, and then ESG Policy Institute in Seoul. So the large corporation, global brands are really afraid of the voice of customers. So mothers, wives, and daughters, and all female leaders can change the corporate behavior.
Thank you so much. For other questions, you have lunchtime to stress our distinguished speakers, and that I thank you so much. And last clap for them, all of them. The floor is yours, ma'am.
All the panelists for being here. Like Martina said, conversations can continue over lunch, which is happening downstairs. And we meet back here at 2:30 for the next panel, which will be focused on women's leadership at the grassroots. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy lunch.